Good evening. I'm so happy that I see so many young faces here. I will try to clean up, Alexander, the water that you poured here. I hope it will not affect...
I'll give you another glass.
No, I hope it will not affect the moment.
So high-end, so it could resist water. Yeah. Okay.
It's okay. So I called my presentation, I've never made lecture actually, so it's my first time in my life, so I'm nervous, being frankly. I call it Making Putin Great Again and Again. Sorry for the quality of the video, because it was made like a quarter of century ago, so you imagine it was only VHS era. Maybe young people don't know what does it mean, VHS. This is a super popular, at the time, we're speaking about 1990s, weekly satirical show Puppets that airs on the main private channel, NTV. This particular series is called The Little Dzeikas, after a fantasy novel of Ernst Hoffmann, The Little Dzeikas, called Cinnabar. It's a story of a mean, short and ugly guy who, out of pity, is bewitched by a good fairy, so the people would see him as a handsome and good man, no matter what he does. In this TV segment, the first Russian president, you see him, that white-haired man, says, how it's possible that me, a Democrat to the core, could give a birth to this little freak. And the little freak, wait a second, I want to make a pause. And the little freak has a face of Vladimir Putin. To imagine the freedom of the speech that we had in that time. In real life, Putin was, just a second, no. You see him. He was already acting president during already 3 weeks after Yeltsin's resignation. We are in January 2000. All the personages of the show, having faces of Russian businessmen, official, and big celebrities, are discussing how ugly and terrible Putin is. Putin was openly mocked here for his appearance. It was particularly ruthless show. This little freak, look this face carefully, is held by a TV fairy in the form of famous oligarch Boris Berezovsky, the owner of another TV channel where I used to work, which became Channel 1, Russia. It suggests that it was him who brought Putin to power, I mean Berezovsky, introducing Putin to Yeltsin's family and giving his candidature to Yeltsin as a successor. And now we see the magic start to work. Let me move a little bit forward. Yes. And everybody enchanted. Some of these figures are not already there. Most of them are died. This is Zhirinovsky. He died right before the war. Everybody's under his spell. Some nice music. So at that time, many people dream of banning this satirical show, but never succeeded. Yeltsin never allowed to shut it down. And why? He had a very strong reason. We'll speak about it later. Putin managed to shut it down, but didn't stop there. Only a year later, NTV was basically expropriated by the state, and Boris Berezovsky, the magic TV fairy, took part, had a role in this expropriation. A new management was installed. The journalistic body was split in two. It was a very dramatic moment, and the protest didn't give any result. And Putin, thanks to magic, TV ferry became very, very attractive in real life. No. So the very first night, after the Putin was appointed acting president, he flew to Chechnya, the separatist republic in Caucasus, where the war was already going on for years. I'm sorry, I'm really sorry for the quality of the video. It's 2000, January 1st. That's the only picture that I could find on net. So he gave awards to federalist soldiers and officers. It was a very strong gesture, very appreciated by the Russians, who were really tired of the war. So right before the elections, I'm sorry, I'm still, yes, here we are. He came to Chechnya once again, and this time he did it on board of a fighter bomber Su-27 as a second pilot. The message was clear. After a decade of devastation and chaos, Putin was the one able to stop the war and bring order and international respect to the country. What a brave man. Let's see some chronicle. On December 1999, his approval rating was 30%. 3 months later, he won the election with 52%. Through the 4 presidential elections that he took part in, his rating only grew. The best being in 2018 with more than 76%. He was different. He made us believe that Russia could be part of free Europe. In 2002, Russia was already accepted in the elite club of the most powerful, the most wealthy powers of the world. And G7 became G8. He discussed with the European authorities the possibility of abolishing visas for the European Union for the Russians, and even mentioned the possibility to enter to NATO. Just imagine Russia in NATO. But we were seriously discussing it. Of course, the world economic and political climate helped Putin a lot. With skyrocketing oil prices, Russia was flooded with money. The fat and wealthy 2000s began, and the upper class of fat and wealthy businessmen and oligarchs wanted to maintain this situation. Ordinary people wanted the stability as well. That was President Yeltsin. What's a pity? Putin was different. He doesn't drink. He has an image of nastoyashi muzhik, which means real man, and he shows it. We saw him in a tank. We saw him in a bathyscaphe. He drove more than 2,000 kilometers in 4 days through Siberia on a Russian car, Lada Kalina, that nobody wanted to buy. It was a drive test. Many stops, many encounters with people, ordinary people. We saw him riding horse. This is fake. This is horse. He takes picture with wild animals and fairly pet them. He even fly with cranes. Who said ugly freak? He recovers 2 ancient Greek vases from the bottom of the sea. However, historian says that these vases was from very different region and different eras. They couldn't be found together. So it has been meticulously documented how Putin spent his vacation. Mostly it was around his birthday. It's October 7, and this year he's going to be 70. Usually he hikes in Caucasian taiga and mountains close to Mongolian border. It was not easy reach, wild nature, strong man, nice picture. But let's mentally flip the camera 180 degrees. You'll see a bunch of people. Photographers who took this picture, cameramen, because there was also a TV reportage, journalist, security, huntsmen, local authority, Kremlin staff, press office, and all this group of people. I didn't find this picture, unfortunately, but if you will find it, please send it to me. He fished a huge luce, 14, 15 kilos, as professional fishermen estimated. Kremlin press office claimed it weighed 21 kilos. The world record is 25 kilos. So Putin is number 2. When I was a news anchor, I had this moment in my career, and I had information like this about loss of 25 kilos, 21 kilos. I used to add, according to presidential press office, or as Kremlin staff said, soon we got a call from the Kremlin, and we was told, please remove this phrase. The truth, their truth, is absolute. There is no second opinion. The night after Putin re-election in 2004, the huge museum complex Manege caught fire. Manege is located 2 steps away from Kremlin. We showed it live because it was night of election, and of course we was showing the result of the vote live. And so it happened in that very moment. All video camera was placed so the Kremlin was behind or in front of Manege, and it looked like Kremlin itself was in fire in the night of Putin's victory. It looked like a sign. It looked like an omen. We received 1 million calls from the administration demanding to rearrange all the cameras. Obviously, we did it. Soon after Putin came to power, the media market was rearranged. We probably not go into these details, but long story short, all major media outlets became state outlets or affiliate to the state. New channels were created. For example, Russia Today, its name later was shortened to RT, and it was broadcasted in English, in Spanish, French, Arabic, and created image of new Russia abroad. The healthy competition between the Russian-speaking channels lose its meaning. The presidential administration let everybody understand that the channels are free to broadcast story from some region about some local problems, but as for big politics, peace or war or elections, they have to stick to the script. Channels started to work together and exchanging content and contacts. They became unified under Kremlin, with various holding, different shareholders, different media structures, but part of the same propaganda organism. In 2006, for the first time as foreign correspondent in Paris, I covered Putin's visit to France. He came to meet President Chirac and German Chancellor Merkel. I must admit I was very nervous. I believe it's very difficult, but it turned out that that was the simplest task. An army of Russian journalists came with the president, and everyone had already an assigned place, an assigned task. All footage was duplicated, so not to miss anything for some stupid technical reason. The correct wording has already been brought down from above, and I just had to put it together and throw in some details. Since the beginning of Putin's presidency, there has been a Security Council meeting every Saturday. Usually we got the video from Kremlin, 1 minute of mute video, so you don't listen what they are speaking about, what they are talking. The text issued by press office was quite always the same. The meeting took place, such and such officials were presented, they were discussing Russian and international issues. Period. We literally shifted the script shift from one Saturday folder to another one, and to another one, and to another one, and it lasted for months. So finally, I remember an editor-in-chief, young and brave, and he just took office, had the courage to ask for permission to remove this episode out from the news. He didn't succeed. The more Putin, the better. It became a common strategy for media success, with no limit on resources spent, despite huge budget holes within most channels. Every federal TV channel has a department who works exclusively for Putin and top officials. The best redactors and writers, the best cameramen and editors are working there. On Channel 1, this department is unofficially called Garant TV. Ironically, the constitutional states, the Russian constitution states that the president has to guarantee the implementation of law. That's why Garant TV, so it's TV of guarantor of the implementation. This is a direct line with Vladimir Putin. It happened once in a year. It's a live televised Q&A session broadcasted by major TV channels. Putin responds to anyone's questions submitted by text, electronic mail, telephone, and live video. The direct line is meticulously prepared. All the questions made public went through the strictest control, and there is rehearsal under rehearsal. The event became widely mediatized, at least a week before the day. The preparation, new call center, the multitude of covered subjects, the diversity of people asking the question. People ask Putin to solve their problems, to help with expensive or inaccessible treatment or medicine, to fix an non-existent road or old house, to open a school or hospital in their village. People are looking for justice. The day off is the main and the only news. Even a week after the event, his conversation is discussed on TV. The promises start being fulfilled. All these problems could be and must be solved on local level by local authorities, simply by following the existing laws and regulations. But only Putin's personal intervention can push it. To make the show more digestive, there is always some informal elements. Kids who ask for a dog as a present, we've seen him in the beginning, or for a picture with president, or old lady, babushka, who invites him for a cup of tea or something like that. Some nice relaxed moment to make the audience smile. And Putin, as Santa Claus, make all dreams come true. The same story with Putin annual press conference. Hundreds of journalists from all over the world are invited to take part on it. Putin answers their question live for 3, 4, and sometimes almost 5 hours in a row. And while many of those questions are pure improvisation for the president, many others are staged. I have to admit that he has a lot of TV charisma. I don't know any of world leaders who hold such events, speaking directly to the people or answering questions to local international journalists for hours. Putin became the #1 generator of news about Russia and for Russia. It didn't change when Dmitry Medvedev replaced him in 2008. All major broadcasters maintain a balance. President Medvedev first, it was in 2008. Prime Minister Putin goes after him. If there is report about Medvedev, there must be a report about Putin, whatever he did or said, any insignificant event. Both of them showed absolute agreement and even a sort of friendship. Sometimes it looked too staged. It is exactly during Medvedev's presidency that the Russian constitution has been changed. So Putin got the opportunity to be elected again for 2 terms until 2024. But last year, the Russian constitution has been changed again during a referendum. So in 2024, Putin can run for 6 years presidency again, and then again, another 6 years. He can legally remain in power till 2036, when he's gonna be 84. Many experts said that the propaganda itself fully started in that time. 2 events marked that year. Putin's re-election, it was in March, and the beginning of the Orange Revolution in Ukraine. It was a very dramatic moment for the young and sovereign republic. The pro-Russian candidate Viktor Yanukovych officially won the election, but many people was not agree. They said there was many cheating in it. And after the many protests, it was recounted, revoted, and pro-Western, pro-European candidate Viktor Yushchenko officially won. But it scared the Kremlin till the death, because the example of such a shift in power in protest in Ukraine jeopardized the influence, business, property, and everything that Russian elite acquired under Putin's presidency. So they need to arrange a successor. The choice was made, Dmitry Medvedev. His approval rating was 28% when he was a prime minister. He was elected with more than 70% of vote. How it happened? Television had to show him every day, no matter what he did, no matter what he said, as it did with Putin. They tried to control even during a weather forecast, because the control became total. To scare the population in times of tension with Europe about Russian policy, they would announce an exaggerated, very cold winter. The idea was, now we cut off Europe's gas supply and they will all freeze. That's how it's happened now. The control of the media became total. The strict order for presenting information was established over the phone. And, smartphone was not welcome in the upper class, in the authority environment. This phone easily to listen to, so simple Nokia was their tool. So it was strange, the richest, the wealthiest people of Russia working with the Nokia, with the simplest telephone. The news was that made the cut were mainly positive. The propaganda concept that is especially dominant today, if there is any issue, it can be solved successfully. And so we can see it on a TV, as Putin showed on the direct line or on the press conference. It was forbidden to report some tragic accident or technological or ecological disaster right after Putin. A layer in between is needed. So there is no direct connection with president's image. Any television speaker had to be on approval list, even musicians or film directors on the cultural TV channels. There was also a lot of forbidden public figures, such as Mikhail Kasyanov, former prime minister under Yeltsin presidency. And he was a consistent critic of Putin. Or Eduard Limonov, writer and head of the far left party, Bolsheviks party. He died recently. Or Alexei Navalny. I'm sure you know this name, absolutely taboo. All political shows were recorded. They were broadcasted live only for the Far East time zone, then corrected, censored, in time for the Europe part of Russia, because the most population living in the European part. Moscow is 1/10 of all Russian population. We have 145 million, and it's about 15 million people are living in the capital. The list of allowed expressions were renewed constantly. We say this way, we don't say that way. We couldn't say annexation of Crimea. It was absolutely taboo. Reunification of Crimea. Doesn't it sound more positive? Gas explosion became gas clap. Clap is like this. It is not so dramatic as explosion, even if we are talking about many victims and huge damage as it happened in Magnitogorsk, December 31st, 2018. About 40 people died. Flooding, it's something like leaking water. Fire is only a smoke. Collapsed buildings became the fall of plaster. Downsizing, firing, or shutting down became optimization. For example, the number of employees in the automotive industry has been optimized for 200 places. It means 200 people were fired. Stagnation became stabilization. Sanctions are always useful sanctions. Drop, like drop in income, is a development with negative dynamic. So imagine a title in a newspaper, and this is real title. Putin says, in Russia, there has been a slightly negative growth in industrial production. Slightly negative growth in industrial production. It means something is not going well. So the war in Ukraine is not a war, but a special operation. You know that. In an Orwellian way, public opinion control started with semantics. Like in George Orwell novel 1984, freedom is slavery, ignorance is a power, war is peace. In the beginning of the propaganda era, major media give mostly real but very selective facts. It's like in parable of 7 blind men. Everyone was asked to touch the elephant, they were blind, and described it. One touched the tail and said the elephant is like a rope. Another touched the leg and said the elephant is like a pole. The third touched the trunk and compared it to a snake, and so on. None of them lied. But it was not the full truth. It wasn't elephant. But then started propaganda lie after lie. We saw it in Georgian war in 2008. The facts were distorted. Right after South Ossetia proclaimed its independence, a movie was issued, and obviously with Kremlin's version of the event. They wanted to imprint into public memory the right version, their truth. So the real facts was erased, or they was trying to erase from public memory. The main objective of propaganda is fear, because the fear that keeps people under control. The federal media installed fear, the fear of being different, the fear of being opposite to the mainstream. Independent media was proclaimed foreign agent. Fear of having Russia without Putin and his strong hand. The commitment to traditional values was declared. No gay propaganda, no same-sex marriage, no transgender people. Homophobia became a state policy. They said it was all Western values. TV channel shows regularly stories of how Americans changed the gender of their children because on a whim, or because it is the order of the day. Then the children suffered, of course, and have to change their gender back. The media created an almost biblical image of enemy, Sodom and Gomorrah. Other countries want to destroy Russia and seize its territory and natural resources. Many Russians believe in it. Did I mention that Putin came from Soviet Secret Service? After a career in KGB, he became their leader in 1994, before becoming prime minister in 1999, before becoming president in 2000. Skyrocketing career. Gradually, very important and painful for all Russian topic arose: Second World War and Russian contribution to the victory over fascism, which was never prized enough by the West. It was very sensitive subject. It is very sensitive subject for all Russian. The Soviet Union lost 26 million lives in the war. This demonstration, all Russian hold the pictures of their ancestors, father, grandfathers, who participated in Second World War, who died during the Second World War. Almost all families lost somebody, and the generational trauma is still felt to this day. I personally have never had my grandfathers. They were both killed in autumn 1941. My father became orphan at the age of 6. My mom was born already being an orphan. So in 2014, when the Kremlin started declaring that Ukraine builds its policy on Nazi principle, and it's a direct threat to Russia and all Russians, you can imagine the answers, the feeling. Russia annexed Crimea and start hybrid war in the Donbass, the eastern part of Ukraine, and the things starts, and everything started falling apart. Around this year, around February 24 this year, almost all opposition media has been suppressed. The Echo of Moscow radio and Novaya Gazeta, its editor-in-chief is Peace Nobel Prize laureate Dmitry Muratov. All these media were shut down. All independent bloggers were declared foreign agent. Who can trust a foreign agent who sings to the tune of depraved West? Many public persons who openly stand against the war and the Kremlin were penalized or prosecuted or now wanted. The power shot up everyone who still had critical thinking. We had cases when people went out on the street with white A4 sheet like this. There was nothing written on it. They were arrested because they believed that this is a protest. Nothing was written. Russian parliament rushed to adopt repressing laws. It imposed jail terms and fines for fake news. Those who tell true about war crimes in Ukraine committed by Russian army can now face up to 15 years in prison. The number of criminal investigation and cases about fake news varies from 1 to 200. Also, the parliament imposed fine for public calls for sanctions against Russia. The access to foreign media such as BBC or CNN is limited. Facebook is forbidden. Instagram also. Other social networks as well. The authority hold show trials to maintain the atmosphere of fear. Last week, young journalist Ivan Safronov, who was accused of treason, was sentenced for 22 years in prison. In his article, he used facts from open sources, from internet, but he was opposed to Kremlin, so 22 years in prison. Alexander has an example of some criminal cases of murdering, and people get 15 years in prison. This young boy got 22. So what now Russian can see on TV? In the beginning of last week, World News documented the occupation of Ukrainian Zaporozhye nuclear site by Russian troops. It shot down, regularly bombarded, so it could be it's a real possibility that it became a new Chernobyl. By the end of last week, all international media reported a victorious offensive of the Ukrainian army. It kept pushing Russian troops back to the Russian frontiers. In 3 days, they canceled all the success of Russian army achieved in last months. What Russian TV channel are speaking about? I monitored Channel 1 Russia, where I used to work. News shows are getting longer. Minimum 60 minutes instead of 30 and 40 in peaceful time. So Tuesday, Putin's visit to Far East and Vladivostok. First 27 minutes 27 minutes dedicated to him. The main story is about Putin asking to provide the Russians with vacations in domestic resorts, which needs to be built. So we still don't have enough domestic resorts for all Russians. Wednesday, Putin participates in Far East Economical Forum, 30 minutes of Putin speaking. Thursday is the day when Queen Elizabeth died. Channel 1 Russia opened its news show showing a reportage about a new highway inauguration. Putin is obviously the main character of the story, even he was only presented virtually, so he was not on the place. Friday, big story about Ukrainian grain supply. Putin said the West stole the grain that was destined for the poorest country. Saturday, Russian capital celebrates its 875 years. So massive festivity in Moscow, street concerts and fireworks. President and Supreme Commander Putin inaugurate the biggest Luna Park Ferris wheel in Europe, while the Russian army suffers the most massive losses since the beginning of the war. The wheel stopped working the very next day. Russian television create a parallel reality. So how we got there? Alexander mentioned already that we were studying together in Moscow University's faculty journalism. I graduated in 1991. We were the last Soviet class. Few months after we've got our diploma, the huge Soviet empire collapsed. New era started. By that time, all the world knew two Russian words, glasnost and perestroika, which means freedom of speech and changes. And we young journalists, we were so proud of it and of our mission. In the 90s, Russia was the country where freedom of speech was almost sacred. In 1990, the first and the last Soviet president, Mikhail Gorbachev, abolished censorship. 1990. The number of newspapers and magazines started growing exponentially. The press begins to speak on previously forbidden topics: drug addiction, pedophilia, Stalin's political concentration camps, Gulag and its prisoners, corruption, sex, which was taboo in Soviet Union. There was no limit on social discussions of the most important issues. When the Soviet Union collapsed and President Yeltsin won election in a new Russia, he didn't allow the press to be oppressed. He had great respect and appreciation for journalists because they supported him during his confrontation with Gorbachev and influenced his election. However, life in the 90s was difficult for most Russians. Poverty, organized crime, corruption, lack of social protection. In the beginning of 1996, by the end of Yeltsin's first term, his approval rating was about 4%, only 4%. So he had no chance to be re-elected. Political and businessmen elite were afraid of return to the communists because communists already won the parliament election, so they dominated, they had a majority. Nobody wanted it. Journalists took it as a mission to save the country from the communists. So they united in support of Yeltsin. All TV channels agreed to show only positive reports about him and devastating stories about communist candidate Gennady Zyuganov, and minimum times for other candidates. I even don't remember how many there were, like 4 or 5. Yeltsin won first turn with 35% against 33 of Gennady Zyuganov. Then second turn was almost 54%. Media agreed for a compromise. Lying for a good cause doesn't count. But they got what they feared, the dictatorship. In 2000, Mikhail Kozhokin, editor-in-chief of Izvestia newspaper, recalls the very first of Putin's interview as president. It consisted of written responses, and 1.5 hour meeting. When Izvestia received answers to their question, there was added by Putin's hand, in particular in the paragraph that in Russia, as in a democratic country, there are 3 branches of power. The question was about 4th branch, the media. Putin replied that the media is not the power. Sure, it is a tool to get what you want. And what about TV Fairy? Do you remember that guy in the puppet show? Soon after Putin became president, Berezovsky started openly criticize him. He lost all his business. A criminal, including Channel 1 Russia, that he was an owner. A criminal case was brought against him. He immigrated. In 2013, he was found dead in his home in Titnes Park in Great Britain. The circumstances of his death are still not clear. The official version, he committed suicide.